Yeah, so here we are again, Paul. Yeah, we started this discussion around humanity. And actually, one thing's occurred to me quite late on in this series of discussions, most valuable discussions we've had, is who are we? If we're talking about humanity, who are we? Even Freud, who is not a Christian, said it's a privilege of a lifetime to become who you are. And it's actually become is one step further than actually realizing who you are. It's quite a long way down the track. I'm always I've always tried to be true to myself. I've always had a certain amount of authenticity, but in fact, it's only become recent. In fact, yesterday or the day before, when I actually did Jordan Peterson's personality test, I went through that, and actually, there were things in there which confirmed who I am. And the challenge is, I guess, for us as human beings, have we got the courage to be who we are, or just to be us? And because I think there's a weird fear in all of us that prevents us from doing that. So I thought that'd be an interesting thing to talk to you about with,
Yeah.
So over to you, my friend. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a great topic. I mean, I was kind of thinking about that at the moment because I'm going full blown from putting my marketing and communication focus. I'm taking it away from a creative audience, advertising and filmmaking, and turning it to founders, to CEOs, probably in tech.
Yeah.
So I'm going through an ascension and an evolution. I'm wondering about sort of like, how that's going to change, how that will manifest in an identity shift or an identity change. And I'm not sure it will, because in my heart, I still feel that I'm a creative director. But I watched a sermon this week and I sent it to my sponsee. And it was by Bevelyn Beatty, who now calls herself something else because she's married. And she's one of the Jesus Matters girls. I don't know. Are you familiar with her? She was the one who tipped black paint on the BLM sign. Right. And I've been watching her for like ever since she did that. I think she's great. And I've been on her Bible studies. And she's really funny because she's ghetto, right? And so when she does, I mean, this last sermon that she did was fascinating because she starts off like she's doing a rap battle. You know what a rap battle is? You've got two rappers. So she basically starts she starts telling you how good her sermon is going to be. And you go, okay, fine, right, okay. And then she spends a long time laying out certain bits of scripture. And then she puts it together. And I like her. I've always been a fan. So she's preaching to the choir. But this time, she really nailed it. I was like, wow, it's like, girl, that's really good. And what she said was she laid out a lot of scripture of the type of, God formed you in his womb. And she said, listen, anything that you feel like, anything that you desire, who do you think put it there? Did you put it there?
Yeah.
Right? Can you tell, can you decide who you love, what you like, what you want to do? Can you control those desires? And we know from a physiological, from a psychological point of view, we're not masters in our own houses.
Yeah.
Okay, we're just not, right? I mean, I should be 88 kilos. I haven't been 88 kilos for about like 23 years. Yeah. It's like, you know what I mean? And it's and I bet if I got a some kind of horrible diagnosis, I could probably brute force myself into it. But it's like, I can't tell what I'm going to think. So what's going on? It's like, where does all this stuff come from? Well, for me, it's very, very simple. It cut the Christian part of me says it comes from God. And the secular part of me, which is what got me onto the spiritual path in recovery, is, well, I don't know where it comes from, but I know one thing for sure. It's not me. Okay. So these characteristics that have these wants and these desires, there's one thing that I know for sure. I have very, very little control over them.
Hmm.
And one thing, I've been reading a book. I can tell you what it is. I'd have to look it up on my phone. I've been reading a book on mimetic desire, because mimetic desire are you familiar with that idea?
No.
Okay, so you'll really enjoy this. This is a great book. It's like the stuff that we want, it's not really what we want.
Hmm.
The stuff that we want, it's what other people want. We pick up other people's desires, right? It's like, for example, in England, everyone wants to buy a house. You go to vast parts of Europe, people are happy to rent all their lives. You don't have to buy a house. If you go to a CA meeting in Buckerstill or somewhere in a really nice suburb in Essex, people are going to be sitting around. They're going to be wearing APL trainers. They're going to be wearing Rolexes. They're going to wearing Panerais. Okay. If you go to a CA meeting in the city or in Wall Street, those guys are going to be sitting around. They're going to be wearing Gucci's. They're going to be wearing Pradas. They're going to be wearing Patek Philippe's. They're going to be wearing Brequays, right? It's like it's there. We want what other people want. I mean, this has been scientifically proven. So the author, okay, so the guy who came up with the idea of mimetic desire, and this basically sets up, this is really deep. It's also an explanation for the scapegoat mechanism, because we copy people. And that's why, funnily enough, the most famous stoning that the world's ever heard about wasn't actually a stoning, because Jesus said, "Let he who is without sin cast the first stone." And what he did is he broke the mimetics. Well, he didn't broke, but he preempted the mimetic cycle. This is why mobs are so dangerous, because one person, as soon as one person does it, the cost of violence diminishes as it goes down the chain. Right. Yeah. So someone throws the first brick, someone throws by the time you've sown the 100th brick, there's no cost to you. And what it is, we're copying, we copy. We don't know, we copy. We have this programming that operates underneath our consciousness. Yeah. If you don't believe me, just look at a reflex. Right? If you know what I mean? If you're about to knock your coffee over and all of a sudden you grab it, you didn't think about that. One of the things that I try and tell my sponsees is like, you're really not in control of your life. You think it's kind of like, you think your life is live commentary on sport, right? So if you're watching someone, if you're watching England play and Gary Lineker's giving a commentary, it's happening in real time. You think that's how you live life. It doesn't. Life actually happens, and the voice in your head is commenting on what's happened. It's a commentary. It's not accurately reporting what's happened. It's a narrative.
Yeah.
So we are not masters in our own houses. So if you can accept that premise, then you have to go, okay, why is it that I like the things that I like? And Girard, who came up with the idea of mimetic desire, he talks about thick desires and thin desires. And a thin desire is it's idolatry. It's having that job, it's having that car, it's having that status. It's and some of these are good, but a lot of the time the expressions are very, very thin. But the weird thing is, even though they're thin desires, they're more powerful than the thick desires. Okay. And I think the biggest thick desire that we have as humans is union with our creator.
Yeah.
So, and and this gives me a good opportunity to thank you for one of the biggest lessons that you've taught me, is that Jesus wants us to be ourselves, because that's how he made us. Yeah. Right. Those are the factory settings that he put in us. Yeah. Right. If he doesn't want to, he doesn't want a Samsung trying to be an iPhone.
Yeah.
He doesn't want a pianist trying to be a town planner.
Yeah.
It's like, I made you the way that you are, so it goes full circle. In through looking to Christ, we can truly become who he designed us to be.
Yeah. And I think it's sort of, I think the starting point as well is trying to understand who we are. You talked there, Paul, about us getting blown around in the wind and copying, because I do think copying, we are designed to copy Jesus pretty much. He's our human manifestation of God, which we are encouraged to sort of copy, but not in a prescriptive type of way. I don't think it's in the context of understanding who Paul is, and Jesus really values you for who you are. So certainly when I did the Jordan Peterson thing, it gave me some specific traits that I found quite helpful. So for example, I'm not an agreeable person, Paul.
What did you score on agreeability?
Well, my politeness was 0.
Right? Mine too. I got a 0.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah. Michaela Peterson got a 0 as well.
What was that? Sorry?
Michaela Peterson, his daughter, she also got a 0.
Yeah, and I think that's really, but that very much, and you can look at that and either say, well, I'm going to reject that and try and fit in the way you've just described, or you can say, actually, that's the way Jesus made me, and that's just the way I am. But actually, in terms of what I do, it's a critical in the context of my other traits. It's important because I'm a catalyst. I'm a turnaround expert. You don't want a turnaround expert to be agreeable. You need someone who will sail into the wind. But interesting enough, there's a flip side of this, which is I am 91% compassionate, right? So with that disagreeableness, most of what I do is focused at really taking interest in people, making time for other people. Other things were things like conscientious. I'm extraordinarily conscientious, which means I'm not very good at not being busy. I'm 88% conscientious, 96% industrious, extroversion 99%, enthusiasm 97%, assertiveness 98%, and neuroticism 3%. Which means that an interesting thing about neuroticism, right, is that I never focus on the negative, right? And I think that's biblical. So I think some of these characteristics are really, and I think the other thing is actually, I think I've developed my compassion for people actually through my faith. I don't think when I was younger that I was a great supporter of the underdog, but I don't think I had such compassion. I think that's something that's manifested itself. But the neuroticism thing, cannot stand. This is where I can't stand the woke thing. I mean, my disagreeableness is really driven around, or lack of politeness is driven around my perception of what's true and what's not true, and my interest in that. And, the focus on negative, which is absolutely non-biblical. Jesus says, focus on what is good and true and the rest of it. So I really, really reject that, which sort of makes sense in relation to my neuroticism. My volatility is low, which means I can cope with a stupid amount of difficulty. My intellect is 97%, which means I'm interested in tackling complex problems, as well as actually you kindly pointed out, this profitability thing is actually about formulating a clear strategy, because openness is about setting new vision and direction. So I think, and some of those traits, when I look at that, I could say, well, I'll try and sort out my politeness, okay? But actually, I'll tell you one, it's a real strength, because as a leader, you should be the ultimate problem fixer in the organization. So things should get escalated. If someone fails to achieve something, someone can come and ask me to fix it. And ultimately, I can fix problems, Paul. I'll give you an example of a really extreme problem I fixed. I used to run an automotive manufacturing company. We used to make piston pins for engines in the States. And one time we ran out of steel for these piston pins, which means you stop a car factory in the States. And that's a very, very big problem. And I discovered actually through my tenacity and my sort of disagreeableness and my ability to get to the facts that this is actually British Steel's problem. And actually, I got through, I discovered that British Steel, I phoned up British Steel. I wanted to speak to a board member because this was going to kill our company. So they immediately said, I'm sorry, they're all in a board meeting. I said, look, can you get one of them out? Can you get the operations director out at the board meeting? And I read him the riot act and said, look, I need you to fix this problem. And I continuously asked him, right, what's stopping you from fixing this problem, right? Most people have backed off at the first stage. And I asked him till I got a satisfactory answer, and they broke a rolling cycle in a steel mill. Now, breaking a rolling cycle in a steel mill, Paul, is something that no one ever does. I don't know anybody who ever does that, right? But because of my strength and my tenacity and my ability to sort of be rather impolite, really, but very, that's the sort of thing in a turnaround situation. They're the sort of problems I solve. But I do it with a passion for people. So when I do that, the dust settles, but actually there's a real learning point, in terms of that relationship moving forwards. That's very unlikely to happen again. So it's almost like an extreme amount of accountability that from time to time I will place upon people, but with a genuine interest in, developing people as well. So there are things I think, naturally that we might reject, and you might be fearful of, maybe you don't make enough time for people or whatever. And the challenge is, this is all about diversity, which is this weird EDI thing, which we've been talking about. It's actually about, I think, acknowledging that Paul is different from Tom, and that's okay, because when we look at the world, we'll see different things, and actually we bring different things. So let's value that. Let's rather than fearfully, hold back and not be ourselves, because I think there's a real cost to that, Paul. I think the minute we haven't got the confidence and we're too fearful to be ourselves or do what we think is innately natural to us, which is I think when you were talking about getting blown around the wind and the sort of watches that people wear, I think you're true. But I think at the same time, we know naturally what's right or wrong, or what fits with us and what doesn't, based on who we are. So I think it's a very
true, but ethics aren't the same as desires. You're right, but I mean they can be sometimes, but they should be two different categories.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yes, that's a very good point. That's a very good point. So just taking that point, I mean, when you're doing your stuff, Paul, in terms of who Paul is, in terms of your characteristics, what are the things that you find difficult to accept in your profile in terms of, did you do the Jordan Peterson thing yourself, or?
I just quickly put, I wanted to listen to what you were saying. I just quickly put, what's it called? Understanding yourself?
Understand yourself, yeah.
Yeah, understanding yourself. I did do it. God knows where it is on my,
yeah.
Yeah, I can't find it, but I remember getting a 0. I mean, I remember being quite pleased, and I remember thinking it was incredibly accurate.
Yeah.
And look, I've been really, really lucky. It's like in 30 years of advertising, I don't think I've actually had to turn any work away. I mean, people haven't asked me to do it. It's just listen, for the last 2 years, it wasn't really a problem. If something was, it's the work that I would have to turn away now would have a political or an ideological flavor to it, and that just hasn't been the case for like the last 28 years.
Yeah.
What I'm moving to is, I've decided that maybe it's time to stop telling lies about products and start to, not necessarily lies, but like, I'm doing this. They're kind of like white lies. They're kind of like fiblets. I mean, that's what advertising is. It's
yeah.
You're telling a story that has at best tenuous grip on the reality of the product attributes. So I'm moving from telling lies about products to telling the truth about people, and getting to the truth and expanding that, and giving it a reframe. Well, I guess the process is finding it, revealing it, and then framing it, and then showing how that can work in a conversion story.
Yeah. Great. And in terms, just take your your politeness factor, which is similar to mine, which is interesting. And there's an interesting aspect to that in terms of a connection there, and a sort of common element maybe in terms of who we are. Do you find that's problematic, or do you push away from that, or are you aware of that, or how does that manifest itself?
No, I quite embrace it. I think that when you've got something like that, it's really weird you asked me that question, because I thought this morning, and I didn't think too carefully about it, and it got nothing to do with this conversation that we were having, but I thought, in the last 10 years, I haven't punched anyone, and I haven't really, really badly verbally assaulted anyone. I think I maybe told 2, maybe 3 people to fuck off. I've actually behaved. I'm not saying my behavior is perfect, but if you contrast it to my behavior before then, I've actually behaved really, really well.
Yeah.
But I am quite forthright. And there's a book. Have you ever read Radical Honesty by Brad Blanston?
No.
Okay, so Radical Honesty was a book that was written by a guy called Brad Blanston. It's worth a read. When I first picked it up, I was like, he said, you should tell the truth to everyone all the time, no exceptions. And I'm like, this guy is just a menace to society. He needs to put away. And then you read it, and it's like, oh my God, it's like what he's saying makes sense. And you'd love it, because he said, the truth is so powerful. The truth has healing properties. It's like, we have to get to the truth. But here's what he said. He said, what a lot of people don't realize is the difference between like someone who can't play golf at all to a scratched golfer, and the difference from a scratch golfer to a pro. The difference between getting from shit to scratch is like that.
Yeah.
The difference between getting from scratch to pro is like a mile. It's like the difference is huge. But he goes, it's like that with practicing honesty. You've really got to have a technique so that so that you can do it. And I think that
and it's true.
Well, there's also that, I was thinking about what would I tell the director. The director I'm working for is black. And, if I were in a conversation, I would say, I go, listen, it's sad to see that hip hop culture has just become so degenerate. And I feel, and I don't think because he's like, I'll be like, it just, it's like, sure, it was hip hop culture by nature has got a gangster outlaw element to it, but it's just, and it's like, and I know most people wouldn't want to say something like that to a black film director, but I would. I mean, I'm not going to die in a ditch on it. So I just think it is degenerate. I think it's sad. And I also, one of the reasons I'd say that is because this guy is actually very, very stylish, and I'm sure he sees that. So it's like, it's a useful attribute to have. It's a rare attribute to have. I agree with you. I think it's part of a love for truth and a value for truth and for being real. And of course, that's one of the reasons I like recovery so much, because in recovery, the premium is on being real. In recovery, if you go to a meeting and you start faking it, people you don't know will start calling you out. It's like,
totally. Yeah.
So
no, there's something very real. I mean, I have been to one of those AA meetings, and it's definitely a no bullshit zone, because people are quite raw. They're sensitive. I found they're very real. They've had real difficulty, and they just don't have any patience for nonsense. And I think as well, just thinking about what you were just saying, I think that in terms of, I mean, I've led quite a few businesses to win awards, and I think that is because of my relentless ability to take things forwards and if I used to say, actually, in fact, it's funny, in 1998, one of the businesses, was it 1998, I led a business that won an award in 6 months. And I used to say politeness is a form of dishonesty, right? Because what they were doing was that was they were reporting up a load of nonsense to the leadership team. And I said, look, this is nonsense. We need to face this. We need to, they'd actually stopped improving. So with my enthusiasm for what we're just talking about in terms of getting to the facts and driving the business forwards, we achieved some extraordinary results. I think as well, what I realized from that, actually having got it to as far as I got it, and I actually recruited my successor, actually there was a limited time frame that made best use of my time, which was about 2 years. And for me as well, based on what I've just said, I need a certain amount of scope. So I'm not very good at just doing one thing. I need to have a lot of scope. So in terms of my openness, I need to look at problems from lots of different angles, which means I need to run big teams. But I think as well, in a turnaround, one of the really interesting things is to get to grips with the cash flow and the financials, which is something that most people haven't got the confidence to do, because it's kind of like looking at a car crash, Paul. It's potentially quite difficult to face. But when you actually get there, and it's actually a great relief, because then you know the problem you have to fix. So the problem goes from being elusive and distant to becoming real, and the actions become clear. And I think,
well, can I just add something there? It's like there is a number of financial fellowships. There's Debtors Anonymous, there's Under Earners Anonymous, there was Workaholics Anonymous, and I went to Debtors Anonymous not because I was ever in debt, but because I knew that I didn't have a healthy adult relationship with money.
Yeah.
And one of the key attributes, how the disease manifests in two ways: vagueness, lack of clarity. People love to live in vagueness, because if they live in vagueness, they can pretend it's okay.
Yeah, and that's one of the
and as a, sorry, can I just say, and as a flip side to that, what that does is that keeps people in what we talk about of the disease of underbeing.
Yeah.
The disease of constantly being in a state where you can't reach your true potential because you're just not grounded in reality.
Yeah.
And you talking about the numbers are reality.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the one fact in a business, most of it's bullshit, but the one fact in the business is how much money have you got in your bank account now? Cash is the only thing that doesn't lie. And I'm a cash generator, so that's a sort of zero bullshit territory. But I think you're right, Paul. You use the word vagueness. I sort of take that to the next level. So specifically, generalizations are the things that we use to justify or normalize things, which creates this vagueness. So people will say, I've got a debt, but that's okay because everybody's got a debt. I can't afford to pay my I can't afford to pay my electricity bill because Putin has, but that's okay because everybody's in the same situation. Of course, it's not okay, but it creates exactly what you just described, that type of dialogue. And so the Winning Thinking program actually professionalizes that. So, but the interesting thing about me as well, weirdly enough, is that despite my profile, the thing I can't stand is telling people what to do. So what I like to do is to people to figure out this stuff for themselves, because otherwise it's a waste of time. So when I engage in whatever I'm doing, I always get people, even though I might feel as though I might know the answer, I always get people. If I'm ever working I run turnaround teams, but I always say to them, we're not creating any PowerPoint at all. The clients will, right? Or the exec team will. Because if we create it, there's that distance. And I learned this very often, very early in my career, that it's utterly worthless and less people figure things out for themselves. So there's a sort of paradox where, and the Winning Thinking program is all about self-realization, experiential learning. And I tell people to do absolutely nothing. In fact, it's extraordinarily difficult. It's extraordinarily, sorry, not difficult. It's extraordinarily, when you get this thing right, the damage you can do by telling people what to do. So, and I think this, this sort of rather pathetic sort of top-down leadership structures that most organizations adopt in sort of command and control just do untold damage. And I think where the true value is actually, for me, I think it's about, having the grace to allow people to be who they are, which requires a huge amount of courage as a leader, because nobody ever does what you expect them to do in the way you expect them to do it. And I've learned actually that that's not necessarily right or wrong. It's just different, and that's okay. But the really important thing is that people have got to be thinking about what they're doing, and they've got to feel accountable, because otherwise, if they don't, and then no one's managing the risk pool. So, they've got all this risk in a business, and you need people to manage that risk, because you simply can't do it yourself. And, the notion that somehow we know better is another, you don't know someone else's job better than they know it. So even with stupid amount of experience I've got of running operations, I've got a pretty good idea of things that go wrong as a hypothesis. But I learned a long time ago never to overstep the mark and sort of suggest that I knew better than the person that's actually doing the job. So I think there's a whole raft of sort of contradictions in these things. And actually, I think my wife's view was, in terms of my compassion, she probably completely disagreed with that. So even she was pretending that maybe that was a trait that she would rather not admit to in me, maybe. So it's amazing how we sort of normalize things when we look at other people, and create this vagueness to justify our own behaviors, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, look, and the other thing is that we have these like we're absolutely riddled with cognitive biases.
Yeah.
Riddled with them. I mean, I don't know how they are on Wikipedia. Last time I looked, there are 118. And if you think you can keep track of that, you can't. I mean, you and I know that there's such a thing as fake scarcity. We know a few of them, but we're sort of like, we're not really human beings. We're really human feelings.
Yeah.
It's how we feel tends to dictate our reality, and that's kind of like the difference between the right and the left. It's the right tries to put a brake on that by living through principles.
Yeah, and I think personally, I think the whole cognitive bias thing is absolutely very counterintuitive, because actually, in letting people be themselves, that naturally creates an ethical standard that most people live up to. Most people know what's right or wrong. And the minute you start imposing values upon people, they tend to start behaving very badly, or in a very weird, corrupt type of way. Well, in fact, particularly the people that care. And some people go along with it, but you can create this sort of awful, slightly corrupt, unethical, where no one's valuing the truth. And so I think that the route to addressing cognitive biases is very straightforward. Let people be themselves, and encourage free speech. And I know it's partly me, and because I like diverse opinions, I like to stir things up. I'm a catalyst. I'm quite comfortable with difficult conversations. But again, if someone says something, and I come across this, and I love it when people do it, but most people don't, say something really, really off the wall, or really against the culture. And it can be really, so if the culture is, now we are, and I've run businesses that they are the best electronics factory in the world, let's say, and I've run businesses like that. Actually, if someone's on the shop floor, Paul, right, and their machine isn't working, they will not agree with that statement. They will say, I'm the least supported person in the whole country, right? And so it's very difficult for them to speak up against that mantra. But I really take an active, one of the things with my openness, I like to feel as though I'm easy people, because they know the way I feel. I set a standard in terms of my open communication. And so people tend to tell me things as well. So that the openness, that dialogue is really critical. And that's really what, this is the reason why my book is called The Evil of Silence, because, when people stop talking, this is the natural, it's taking interest, it's giving people grace, it's allowing people to be themselves. It's definitely not about imposing values. It's definitely not about trying to redefine purpose and this horrible, toxic, woke stuff. Because the complexity of, as you say, the cognitive biases, the only way to address that is not by, in fact, well, definitely not by training people. Absolutely not. It's about just healthy ongoing dialogue, because it's about, and also speaking face to face to people. So if you and I were speaking face to face, Paul, we wouldn't necessarily be saying these things because there's a distance between us. But I think with social media, the facelessness of it makes it a vicious attack tool for weak people, who can just attack.
Well, again, and it's like, and that accelerates mimetic desire, because it's like you see someone say something horrible, you can imitate that. It's like, look, that he did it. It's like, yeah, it's
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's
no, by the way, and just one other thing, it's like, funnily enough, I only really realized this about a year ago, but thinking actually takes real energy. It burns calories. I mean, I've always had to think very hard, and I certainly early on in my advertising, it's like, why can't other people just think about it for a bit? You'll come up with an idea. Yeah. And then I realized that, and then I probably told myself that I was incredibly talented or some other bullshit. But it's like, people generally don't like to think.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. It's very difficult thinking. I mean, that's the crux of the winning thinking program. It's the awful thing is, right, that we think about 1% of the time, Paul. Most of the time we're just doing things based on our biases, our experiences, and it,
rearranging our prejudices.
Yeah, and our brains exactly, yeah, all of those things. But that's our humanity. You can that's the basis of our humanity, really. What you say and what you think, Paul, is what makes you human. It's not your body. It's that stuff. And so if you deny that to someone, that's actually killing the person. Some philosophers call that suicide of the person by denying someone their view, which is really, really cruel, I think. But the amount of energy it requires to actually think is phenomenal as well. So it's a very painful process. And one of the things on the Winning Thinking program, one of the chapters is called Getting People Thinking. And people do not even recognize. Do you know how you recognize if someone's thinking, Paul?
Their eyes going in different places.
They do, yeah, exactly. Your eyes, when you said that, you thought for a moment, your eyes went up. And that means something. The direction of your eyes also means left or right, up or down, means what type of thinking, what type of thinking you're doing as well. So even at the most basic level, we don't value thinking, which is quite absurd. But of course, if you're not thinking, you're just doing, then how do you develop it? You're very much stuck. So that's the other weird paradox, which because thinking is the way to get people, out of their ruts. As we're talking at the moment. Well, that's been a really interesting discussion, Paul.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. Is there any last points? What's one point we might like to share to summarize this? What would be the one thing you might like to leave anybody that's listening to this or got as far as this place and this discussion? What's maybe the one thing?
I think it's, I mean, for me, it's like, I would say it's not so much what are you doing, but who are you being?
Yeah.
So often it's activities that define us, but really, it's who we're being.
Yeah. That's a really good
before
point.
You do a to-do list. I said a default because I do, I've got a couple of things that I do. I do my prayers and I do my push-ups in the morning, and that just gets me into a place where I'm being the kind of person that I want to be. It's like when I work in 25-minute bursts, and so I read a little bit of. I don't do this all the time. It makes myself sound incredibly rich, but I did happen to do it this morning. Okay.
Yeah.
So when I've done 25 minutes, then I'll read a couple of chapters of the Bible, because I know that will. Do you know what I mean? That's the kind of person I want to be.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
I think, and that's a really interesting point. I think the spiritual side, it comes back to what you were saying before. I think that there's a real, having known who you are, in a Jordan Peterson type way, then the reality is, what are you being? And there's that disconnect. I mean, I think that for me, how do I do that? I think I listen to worship songs. I worship.
Yeah.
It's a spiritual thing, and I think that's actually
Yeah.
where God brings you back to where you are.
Yeah.
To give
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
that,
Yeah. That's the great default.
yeah, and
One of
that
the great
gives you that.
things in recovery is we can spiritually self-medicate. I don't need a drink. I don't need to
I
do a
know.
line of coke. I can just turn my mind to God.
Yeah, but I
And the
think
more you do that, the better you get at it, the stronger your connection.
yeah, and I think that it's also about just thinking about that. I haven't really thought about it much, but I think it also makes you feel more comfortable in your own skin, Paul. You know, by worshiping God, because
Yeah.
Jesus loves the way you are, right? He made you the way you are. He wants you to be the way you are. So for me, maybe, I mean, I've never really thought about it, but I think that makes me feel more comfortable the way I am and more able to be myself and to do the best work I possibly can being myself, as well as
Yeah.
appreciating other people, I think as well.
Yeah.
So I mean, what I was going to say was, and I repeat this time and time again, and I'm going to repeat it again, but I think the other side of this is that in terms of our sanity is very much determined by our relationships we have with other people, I think as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
So I think we really do need to take an interest in what other people are thinking, which may be different to what we value, rather than try to fit it within our own biases or whatever.
Yeah.
And actually acknowledge other people for who they are, which is so important, Paul, because whilst we may know who we are and walk around like some self-righteous pillocks, if we
Yeah.
don't,
Yeah.
if we don't take an interest in other people, then how can we really take a healthy perspective of ourselves?
Yeah. There was this person who was at Thought Leader Business School, and I was going to go and slam her post. And I just decided it just wasn't worth it. But she said, oh, the most important relationship that you have is with yourself. It's like, no, it fucking isn't.
Yeah.
The most important relationship that you have is with God.
Yeah.
Because once you get that right, guess what?
Yeah.
The relationship with yourself becomes much easier. And that's the foundation of steps 1, 2, and 3 in Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yeah.
Right? It's trust God, steps 1, 2, and 3, clean house, steps 4 to 10, and help others, 11 to 12.
Yeah.
It's if you've got a good relationship with God, who made you, the Father, then all of a sudden it's your relationship with yourself is important, but most of it is taken care of with your relationship with the
yeah.
If you don't believe me, it's like look at a child who's an orphan and a child who's got a loving family. It's like that's the difference.
Well, yeah,
It doesn't matter what the orphan does about talking about its relationship to itself. It's like it's going to be, it's not going to be a very functional human being.
Yeah,
I think people forget that.
Yeah, no, I think that's
don't know that.
It's a really good point. I think specifically the Bible doesn't say love yourself, then love God. Because otherwise, no. Does God live up to your expectations, which is a frigging disaster? And that's a sort of woke perspective. It says love God, then love other people, and love yourself. So it is important to love yourself. But I think that's really probably about what we've just been talking about. It's about connecting with God, feeling comfortable in your own skin, and just doing your stuff. And well, that's excellent, Paul. I really enjoyed that discussion. Let's knock it on the head there, shall we?
I'll send you that sermon. I mean, it might not work for you, but for me, it was really a breakthrough. I mean, when she said, "Who are you questioning who you are or what you can do?" God made, to really understanding. It's like God put me together like this. Yeah. I'm like this for a reason.
Yeah,
there's a plan.
Yeah,
there's like who am I to think that I can have this level of influence in my life? I can't even influence what thought I'm going to have next.
I know.
There was just a profound sense of like, I'm really not in control.
Yeah,
I'll send it through.
I mean, on that point, this is the reason why woke is so disgraceful, because it destroys the far more basic elements of identity, i.e. are you male or female, which is just disgusting. And one of my elements of my profile actually is my level of disgust. So there's an element, in terms of open.
Oh yeah, well, a lot of conservatives are like that. I've got high disgust sensitivity as well.
Yeah, but disgust was actually one of the things that drove Hitler, so we have to be a bit careful about that. But
Yeah.
anyway, great discussion, Paul. Thanks for your time.
All right.
Mate. Have a great day. See you later.
Take care.
Cheers. Bye.